If you thought your love life was complicated, wait until you hear about the Greek gods. In this video, we will discover the most daring and lustful divinities of ancient times. Of course, before starting, I remind you that, as in all myths, there are always variations and differences, so just enjoy the video. We begin. Number 1. Zeus. Zeus is not only the king of the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology, he is also the king of perverts, and deserves by far the number 1 position. The list of his love conquests is long and extensive, but I will try to be as brief as possible. Zeus's first wife was Metis, a titaness, and the goddess of wisdom and cunning. According to a prophecy of that time, Zeus would lose his kingdom to his first descendant, so he decided to swallow Metis when she became pregnant with Athena, goddess of wisdom. Zeus then married the slender Themis, the titan of justice, who gave birth to him the Houri and the Fates. In the end, Zeus chose Hera, who was his sister and the goddess of marriage, to become his wife. Together, Zeus and Hera had 4 children. However, Zeus remained obsessed with love affairs even after his marriage, constantly deceiving Hera. His love affairs outraged his wife Hera, who constantly sought revenge. In one of his efforts to hide his infidelity to Hera, Zeus transformed his lover Io into a white cow. However, Hera, suspicious of her husband, asked for the cow as a gift. Once she had Io in her possession, Hera set Argus, a giant with 100 eyes, to watch over her. Zeus commissioned Hermes to rescue his beloved. She guided him transformed into a bird to the tree where Argus had her tied, and Hermes put the guardian to sleep with her flute. Then, Hermes killed Argus. Gives according to myth, Zeus was captivated by Leda's beauty and appeared before her in the form of a swan. He then seduces her, or does it to her without her consent, and gets her pregnant. From their union, 2 sets of twins were born, one of them being Helen of Troy, famous for being the cause of the Trojan conflict. Chryseis, the king of Argos, locked his daughter Danae in a tower or underground chamber because of a prophecy that he would be killed by her grandson. Zeus, ever resourceful, transformed himself into a shower of gold that fell on Danae, and from this unusual union Perseus was born, who would eventually fulfill the prophecy. Zeus was attracted to Europa, a Phoenician princess. To approach her undetected, he transformed into a majestic white bull. Europe was intrigued by this gentle bull, who carried her to Crete on his back, where he revealed her true identity. Europa became queen of Crete, and from her union with Zeus, 3 children were born, among them Minos. Callisto was one of the nymphs who followed Artemis. Zeus was attracted to Callisto and disguised himself as Artemis to get closer to her. In some versions, he disguises himself as Apollo. When Callisto became pregnant and gave birth to Arcas, Artemis became angry, which she considered a violation of her vow of chastity, and transformed Callisto into a bear. Later, Arcas, not knowing that the bear was her mother, was about to kill her. To avoid tragedy, Zeus transformed both into constellations, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. Ganymede was a Trojan prince of extraordinary beauty. Zeus, delighted with him, kidnapped him, took the form of an eagle and took him to Mount Olympus, who made him his lover and cupbearer of the gods. It is also said that Zeus turned it into the constellation Aquarius. Semele was a mortal princess with whom Zeus had an affair. Hera, jealous as always, devised a plan. Disguised as an old woman, she convinced Semele to ask Zeus to show himself to her in all his divine glory, knowing that no mortal could endure such a sight. Zeus, bound by a promise he had made to Semele, reluctantly agreed. Revealing herself in her true form, Semele was consumed by divine radiance. However, Zeus managed to save the son he was carrying, Dionysus, who would later become the god of wine, fun, and one of the great members of this list, as we will see later. Zeus was captivated by Alcmene, Amphitrion's wife. To get closer to her, he took the form of her husband while he was away on a military expedition. Zeus spent the night with Alcmene and extended the length of that night so that it lasted the equivalent of 3 normal nights. From her union with Zeus, Alcmene became pregnant with Hercules, Heracles in Greek. At the same time, Amphitryon returned and also conceived a son with Alcmene. Therefore, she gave birth to 2 sons, one mortal, Iphicles, and one divine, Hercules. Antiope, daughter of the river Asopus, was seduced by Zeus when he took the form of a satyr. She became pregnant with twins, Amphion and Zeto. Leto, a Titaness, attracted the attention of Zeus and became pregnant with twins, Apollo and Artemis. Hera, jealous as always, chased Leto throughout the land to prevent her from giving birth anywhere. Leto found refuge on the floating island of Delos, where she gave birth to her 2 divine children. Despite the difficulties, Apollo and Artemis became 2 of the most revered Olympian gods. Taygete was one of the Pleiades, daughters of the Titan Atlas and the sea nymph Pleione. Zeus chased Taygete, but to avoid him, she transformed into a deer. Despite her efforts, Zeus found her and seduced her. From their union, Lacedaemon was born, who would later found the city of Sparta. Number 2, Poseidon, the friend of the dolphins and the whales, who swims and plays with them, but who also has a dark side, not like deep, and his love for the sea, but almost. Poseidon, one of the most prominent gods of Olympus, had many encounters and relationships in Greek mythology, producing a multitude of descendants, both divine and mortal. Amphitrite was one of the Nereids, and according to legend, when Poseidon saw her for the first time, he fell deeply in love with her. Amphitrite attempted to flee from him, but was eventually persuaded by a dolphin to accept Poseidon's advances. They married and she became queen of the sea alongside Poseidon. According to some versions of the myth, Medusa was a beautiful priestess of the temple of Athena. Poseidon pursued her and eventually seduced her, or according to other interpretations, he did so without her consent, in the temple of Athena. As a consequence, Athena transformed Medusa into a monster with snakes for hair, thus punishing her, while Poseidon suffered no repercussions. While Poseidon pursued Demeter, who was not interested in him, she attempted to elude him by transforming into a mare and mixing with a group of horses. However, Poseidon, realizing this, decided to transform himself into a stallion and followed her. From their union, 2 descendants were born, a horse named Arion and a mysterious goddess, whose name was not openly mentioned, but who is generally known as Despoina, meaning the young lady. Beroe, daughter of Aphrodite and Adonis, was the object of affection of both Poseidon and Dionysus. Finally, Beroe chose Poseidon, and together they had a daughter. Amymone was one of the daughters of Danaus. Poseidon helped her find water during a drought and later became her lover. From their union, Nafplius was born. This princess was in love with the Enipean river. Poseidon, taking advantage of this fact, took the form of the river and seduced Tyre. From this union, the twins Peleus and Neleus were born, who would later become important figures in other Greek myths. It is also worth highlighting various meetings with Alcyone, Cyrene, Lapite, and finally Caeneus was a woman named Canis who was seduced by Poseidon, although most versions agree that she did it without her consent. After this, Poseidon offered her a wish as compensation. Canis requested to become an invulnerable man, never to be wronged again, and Poseidon granted her wish, transforming her into Caeneus. Not only did she grant him that wish, but she also gave him impenetrable skin that made him invulnerable. Pan is the god of shepherds, nature, and music in Greek mythology. In Roman mythology, this god is identified as a faun. He is also known for his impulsive love behavior and antics. Pan fell in love with the nymph Syrinx, but she did not share his feelings and fled from him. To escape her pursuit, Syrinx asked for help and was transformed into a set of reeds. Pan, upon finding the reeds and not being able to find the nymph, joined them together and created the Syrinx, or Pan's flute. which became one of his most recognized attributes. Pan also fell in love with Echo, another nymph, but she rejected him. Hurt to her pride, Pan made some shepherds angry to the point of dismembering Echo. Okay, maybe this god didn't have much success in his love conquests, but the poor guy tried. Just like I do every time I ask you to subscribe to this channel, activate notifications, and by all the gods of Olympus, tell me what you think of this video. Number 4. Dionysus. Dionysus, like other Greek gods, had numerous loves and encounters with mortals and divinities. After Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos, Dionysus found her and fell in love with her. He took her with him, and according to some accounts, he made her immortal. They had several children together. You could say that this was his wife or one of his great loves, Ampelo. This is one of Dionysus's most famous and tragic loves. Ampelos was a satyr, or in some versions, a young mortal. He was loved intensely by Dionysus. After his accidental death, Dionysus transformed Ampelos into a vine, which is associated with Dionysus's invention of wine. According to legend, Prosimnus agreed to show Dionysus the way to the underworld to rescue his mother Semele, on the condition that he and Dionysus share an intimate encounter when she returned. However, Prosimnus died before the promise could be fulfilled, and Dionysus, as a sign of respect for the pact, carved a wooden figure in the shape of a phallus and performed the promised act. A nymph daughter of Aphrodite and Adonis. As we saw before, according to some legends, both Dionysus and Poseidon were in love with her, but she chose Poseidon over her. After her father, Icarius, was murdered by peasants who believed that the wine he had given them, a gift from Dionysus, had poisoned them, Aragone was taken by her dog Mara to the place where her father had been buried. Consumed by pain, Aragone hanged herself. Dionysius, angered by the tragedy, punished Athens with a plague and ordered young Athenian girls to hang themselves in memory of Aragone. On one occasion, Dionysius returned to Thebes, his hometown, to introduce his cult. However, Pentheus, the king of Thebes, rejected this cult and arrested Dionysus. As revenge, Dionysus enchanted the women of Thebes, including Pentheus's mother, taking them to the mountains where they indulged in frantic bacchanal dances. Pentheus was lured into observing these rituals and, in the process, was discovered and dismembered by the women, including his own mother. In addition, Dionysus had a thyrsus, and when he used it, the biggest love festival you could imagine was organized. So if you want to know what that object was made of, as well as the other most powerful weapons and armor in the Greek world, I suggest you watch this video. I'll leave it here above or below in the description. Number 5. Apollo. Apollo never married and inherited from his father Zeus the ability to spread love around the world. One of the most famous stories is that of Daphne, a nymph that Apollo became obsessed with after Eros hit him with one of his golden arrows of love, while he hit Daphne with a lead arrow, causing her to reject him. When Apollo pursued Daphne for her love, she prayed to the river Peneus to save her. In response, she was transformed into a laurel tree, and Apollo, in his obsessive love, declared that this tree would be sacred to him. Cassandra was a priestess of Troy, who was granted the gift of prophecy by Apollo in an attempt to seduce her. However, after receiving the gift, she rejected his advances. In revenge, Apollo cursed her gift, so that even though she always predicted the truth, no one would believe her. Sometime later, when faced with her repeated announcement of the imminent fall of Troy, no citizen believed her predictions. Apollo fell in love with the mortal Coronis, but when he discovered that she was being unfaithful with a mortal, he sent her sister Artemis to kill her. However, while Coronis was on the funeral pyre, Apollo rescued her unborn son, Asclepius, who later became the god of medicine. Hyacinth is one of Apollo's most famous male loves. Jacinta was a young Spartan of great beauty. After several romantic encounters, one day he and his lover were competing in the discus throw when Apollo, to demonstrate his power and impress Jacinto, threw it with all his strength. Jacinto, in turn, to impress Apollo, tried to catch him, was hit by the discus and fell dead. Devastated by the death of his lover, Apollo created the hyacinth flower from spilled blood. Cyparissus was a young man loved by Apollo. To win her love, Apollo gave Cyparissus one of his sacred deer. On one occasion, Apollo gave Cyparissus a javelin to hunt, but the young man, while trying to hunt another deer, mistakenly killed his own. The boy's pain over the loss of the animal was so intense that he asked the god Apollo to allow him to mourn it forever and for his tears to flow eternally. The god accepted his plea and turned him into a cypress, the tree of sadness, pain, and mourning for loved ones, consecrated since then to the deceased. Clytie was a nymph who fell deeply in love with Apollo. When Apollo scorned her for Leukoto, Clytie died of heartbreak and turned into a sunflower, a flower that follows the sun, represented by Apollo as she moves across the sky. Cyrene renounced the work of women and dedicated herself to leading a wild life, watching over her father's flocks in the forests of the Pindus. Apollo encountered Cyrene while she was fighting a lion. Impressed by her bravery, he took her to Mount Pelion, where they had a son, Aristaeus, who became a minor god associated with hunting and beekeeping. Here I leave you 2 other videos to watch. Remember that subscribing is free, and that your comments recommending future videos or saying what you thought of the video are really useful for me.